My father's retirement party had 200 guests, a catered dinner, a slideshow, and a microphone that my mother handed to my brother Caleb, so he could give the toast. Caleb spoke for 11 minutes. He talked about my father's career, his legacy, the lessons he'd passed down. He mentioned my father's golf game. He mentioned the family lake house. He mentioned our dog from 1997. He did not mention me once. Not my name. Not a single word. I was sitting at table 7, not the family table, table 7, beside my father's former co-worker from 2003 and his wife, who kept asking me how I knew the Ashworths. When Caleb finished, my mother stood up and said, "And, of course, thank you to Caleb for organizing all of this. Everything you see tonight, the flowers, the venue, the slideshow, the catering, Caleb handled every detail." She raised her glass. The room raised their glasses. I had spent 4 months organizing that party. I had selected the venue, contracted the caterer, built the slideshow, ordered the flowers, managed the guest list of 200 people, coordinated the hotel room block, and written the program that was sitting on every table in the room. My name was not on any of it. My husband Daniel was sitting beside me at table 7. He watched the toast. He watched my face. He set down his fork, leaned slightly toward me, and said, "I'm going to say something. Tell me if you want me to stop." I looked at him. I said, "Don't stop." What he said next, standing up at table 7 without a microphone, without warning, without anyone's permission, is the thing 200 people in that room have not forgotten. And neither has my family. Before I take you all the way back, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story genuinely stays with you. Drop your city and the time in the comments right now. I always love seeing where you're watching from. My name is Nadia Ashworth. I'm 36 years old. I'm a senior event director at a hospitality group in Nashville, Tennessee. I have planned over 400 events in my professional career, corporate galas, nonprofit fundraisers, weddings, product launches, one very complicated ceremony involving a live falcon that I still think about. I have been doing this work for 12 years, and I am, by every professional measure I know how to apply, very good at it. This is the story of the night my family used my work without crediting it, what my husband did about it, and what happened when 200 people in a ballroom found out who had actually built everything they were sitting inside. Let me take you back to Franklin, Tennessee, the Ashworth House on Mercer Lane. A 5-bedroom craftsman my father had purchased in 1994 and considered his greatest achievement, which told you something about the Ashworth family's relationship to accumulation. My father, Robert Ashworth, had spent 31 years as a regional vice president for a commercial insurance firm. He was a man who liked order, hierarchies, and the particular satisfaction of being recognized in rooms he considered important. He was not a warm man. He was a fair one, which is different. He had rules, and he followed them, and he expected the same. My mother, Linda, was the social engine. She managed the family's public presentation with the focus of someone running a brand campaign. Christmas cards went out November 15th, without fail. The house was clean when guests arrived. The children were presentable. The narrative was consistent. Robert Ashworth, successful career, devoted family, 2 accomplished children. Caleb was 4 years older, which put him in the position most older siblings in ambitious families occupy. Proof of concept. He was loud where I was quiet, gregarious where I was precise, comfortable taking up space, in exactly the way our parents found legible. He sold commercial real estate, made good money, had 3 children, and a wife named Brooke, who my mother described reliably as such a good fit for our family. He was not a bad person. He was a person who had spent 38 years being told the room was his without being asked to question it. I was the event planner in a family that valued results, but not the labor that produced them. By the time I was 28, I had organized every significant Ashworth family event for a decade. My parents' 30th anniversary party, me. My grandmother's 80th birthday celebration, me. Caleb's wedding rehearsal dinner, which Linda had promised Brooke's family would be handled, me. Every Thanksgiving seating chart, every Christmas party invitation, every coordination call with caterers and florists and venues that my mother described to her friends as all coming together so beautifully, me, always me, never credited, occasionally thanked in the specific way that thanks functions when it is given privately and withheld publicly, the kind that keeps the labor available while ensuring it remains invisible. I want to be fair. I did not do this work purely out of obligation. I did it because it was what I was good at, and because there is a part of me that finds deep satisfaction in watching a well-executed event come together. I am not a martyr. I am a professional who was allowing her professional skills to be consumed by her family without compensation, credit, or acknowledgement. Those are different things, and I did not fully understand the difference until I was 34 years old, sitting at table 7. I met Daniel Reeves at a corporate event. I was managing a product launch dinner for a medical device company. 80 guests, ballroom at the Omni Hotel, the kind of event where everything has to work precisely and the margin for visible error is 0. He was one of the guests, the company's regional director of operations. He was the one who, at the end of the night when the last guest had gone and I was doing the final venue walkthrough, came back into the ballroom and said, "I watched you run this whole evening. Every time something needed adjusting, you were already 3 steps ahead of it. I've never seen anyone work like that and make it look this invisible." I said, "Invisible is the goal." He said, "Not to me. I noticed everything." We had coffee the following Thursday. Daniel Reeves was, and is, the kind of person who pays attention. Not to surfaces, to the thing underneath the surface. He noticed that I went quiet at family gatherings in a specific way. He noticed that I organized things for my parents that my parents described as spontaneously wonderful. He noticed, after the 3rd time my mother said, "Caleb put together such a lovely dinner," about a dinner I had planned, that I nodded along without correcting it. He asked me once gently, "Why don't you say anything?" I said, "It's easier not to." He said, "Easier for who?" I didn't have a good answer. We got married at 31. Small ceremony, 40 people, a restored barn outside of Franklin that I found and contracted and styled myself. My mother told her friends the barn had just worked out perfectly. Daniel heard her say this. He looked at me. I shook my head slightly. He exhaled, but said nothing. That was the last time he said nothing. My father announced his retirement in January 18 months ago. 31 years with the same firm. He was 67. The party, everyone agreed, should be significant. 200 guests, formal dinner, a proper send-off for a career my father considered the central achievement of his life. My mother called me in February. "We're going to need your help with the party, Nadia." I said I would help. She said, "Caleb is going to be the host, of course. He's better with crowds, but we need someone to handle the logistics." I said, "Of course. I want to sit with that sentence for a moment. We need someone to handle the logistics." Logistics. As if what I do is move boxes rather than build experiences. As if the difference between a memorable event and a forgettable one is not precisely the work that gets called logistics by people who don't know what it costs. I spent 4 months on that party. I want to be specific. Venue. I contacted 11 venues, toured 6, negotiated a contract with the Westhaven Ballroom in Franklin, a space with a capacity of 220, valet parking, full AV, a preferred caterer list I reviewed and cross-referenced against dietary restrictions submitted by 200 guests. Contract value, $18,400. Negotiated by me. Signed by my father. Catering, 3 tastings over 6 weeks, final menu selected and approved by my mother, coordination of the dietary restriction matrix, 14 vegetarian, 6 gluten-free, 2 kosher adjacent, 1 severe nut allergy, requiring a kitchen protocol waiver. All managed by me. Slideshow. I reached out to 11 family members, my father's former colleagues, 3 golf friends, and his college roommate. I collected 340 photographs. I selected 87. I wrote the captions. I built the presentation, timed to music I had licensed, running 22 minutes with transitions matched to the score. My mother watched it at the review meeting and cried. She said, "This is just beautiful." She did not ask who made it. Guest list, 200 people, managed through a shared document I built and updated across 4 months, including RSVP tracking, plus 1 management, hotel room block coordination with the Marriott on Cool Springs Boulevard, and table assignments for a room of 200 people, where the seating dynamics included 2 former business rivals, 1 complicated divorce, and my father's college roommate, who had not spoken to my uncle in 6 years. Program. Designed, written, printed. My name was not on it. I drove to the Westhaven Ballroom on the morning of the party at 7 a.m. The event was at 6 p.m. I spent 9 hours there, directing setup, approving the table arrangements, walking the AV team through the slideshow timing, managing a flower delivery that was 40 minutes late and required real-time substitution of the centerpiece design for 3 tables. I was in the venue bathroom changing into my dress at 5:45 p.m. when my mother texted, "Are you here? Guests are starting to arrive." I was there. I had been there for 9 hours. I walked into the ballroom at 5:50 p.m. My mother saw me, said, "You look nice," and walked immediately toward an arriving guest. Caleb was at the entrance greeting people in the way Caleb greeted people. Large, warm, effortlessly present. He had arrived at 5:30. I know this because the venue coordinator told me, with a slightly careful neutrality, that he had asked where things were. I was seated at table 7. Table 7 was not the family table. The family table was table 1, center of the room, 8 seats, my parents, Caleb and Brooke, Caleb's 3 children, and 1 seat that held my father's older brother. I was at table 7 with my husband Daniel, my father's former colleague from 2003 named Phil, Phil's wife Janet, a couple I didn't recognize who turned out to be friends of Caleb's from his golf club, and an empty seat where someone had RSVP'd and not appeared. Daniel looked at the table number when we sat down. He looked at me. I looked at the program I had written, which had no name on it, and said, "It's fine." It was not fine, but I had been saying it was fine for 34 years, and I was very practiced. The evening ran exactly as I had planned it. The dinner service was timed correctly. The slideshow played at the right moment. The AV didn't fail. The flowers held. The room looked the way I had seen it in my mind for 4 months. 200 people moved through it smoothly, eating well, finding their seats without confusion, laughing at the right moments in the program. Nobody knew how it happened because that is the definition of a well-executed event. It disappears into the experience. My father stood up and said it was the greatest night of his career. He thanked the Westhaven staff. He thanked Linda. He thanked Caleb. He said, "I am a lucky man to have a family that loves me this much." He sat down. Caleb's toast came next. 11 minutes. He was good. I'll give him that. He knew how to hold a room. He talked about my father's work ethic, his integrity, the way he'd taught Caleb to shake a man's hand and look him in the eye. He talked about the lake house and the summers there. He talked about the dog from 1997, whose name was Chester, and got a laugh. He talked about the legacy my father was leaving. He did not say my name. When Caleb finished, my mother stood up. "I just want to add," she said, and she had that voice, the warm public voice, the one she deployed at charity events and church socials, the one that made everything she said sound like a gift. Thank you to Caleb for making all of this possible. Everything you see tonight, the venue, the flowers, the food, the beautiful slideshow, Caleb pulled it all together for his father. We are so proud of the man he is. She raised her glass. 200 people raised their glasses. I looked at the centerpiece on table 7. I had chosen those flowers: cream ranunculus, eucalyptus, ivory garden roses. I had substituted them this morning when the original order arrived short on blooms. Daniel set down his fork. He turned to me. He said, very quietly, "I'm going to say something. Tell me if you want me to stop." I looked at him. I thought about the bathroom at 5:45. I thought about 14 years of logistics. I thought about my mother's voice saying Caleb pulled it all together. I said, "Don't stop." Daniel stood up. He did not have a microphone. He was at table 7. But Daniel has a voice that carries without effort, the kind that comes from years of running operations meetings and meaning what he says. The room heard him. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm sorry to interrupt. My name is Daniel Reeves. Nadia Ashworth is my wife." He paused. Just a beat, the kind of pause that tells a room something is about to matter. I've been sitting here listening to a beautiful tribute to a man who has clearly had a remarkable career. And I want to add something, because I think this room should know it. 200 people were looking at him. The venue you're sitting in tonight, Nadia selected it. She toured 6 venues over 3 weeks and negotiated this contract. The dinner you just ate, she ran 3 tastings, coordinated the menu, and managed the dietary requirements for every person in this room, including the nut allergy protocol that kept one of your guests safe tonight. The slideshow that made half of you cry. She collected 340 photographs, selected 87, wrote every caption, and built it over 3 weeks. She was here at 7 o'clock this morning, and she was still here at 5:45 tonight, changing in the bathroom before the doors opened. She has been doing this for her family for 14 years. He paused again. Her name is not on the program. She was not mentioned in the toast. She is sitting at table 7. He looked around the room, once steady. "I just thought you should know who built what you're sitting inside." He sat down. The room was completely still. And then, from somewhere near table 4, someone started clapping. Then table 12. Then the room. 200 people applauding at table 7. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. Not because I was unmoved, but because I was so far past the thing that causes crying that I had arrived somewhere else entirely. A place that felt like bedrock. The feeling of something that has been invisible for a very long time being finally and publicly seen. My father was looking at me from table 1. My mother was not looking at anyone. Caleb was looking at his water glass. Let me pause right here and ask you something. If your spouse stood up in front of 200 people and said publicly what yours had spent years refusing to say, would you have let them speak? Or would you have said stop? Tell me in the comments. I have asked this to so many people, and the room always divides exactly in half. I want to know which half you're in. My mother found me in the hallway outside the ballroom 20 minutes later. The party had resumed. These things resume because events have momentum, and 200 people are not going to let one moment stop a dinner they paid formal wear for. She was holding a glass of wine with both hands, and she had the look she got when she was deciding which version of herself to deploy. She deployed the wrong one. That was embarrassing, she said. For all of us. I looked at her. For which of us specifically? Daniel should not have done that. Not here. Not tonight. This was your father's evening. It was, I said. And I built it. I paused. You told 200 people Caleb did. Caleb was the host. Caleb arrived at 5:30 and asked the venue coordinator where things were. I said this without heat, just the fact. I arrived at 7 a.m. and spent 9 hours making sure he had something to host. My mother pressed her lips together. "We didn't think you'd mind." And there it was. The sentence that contained everything. Not malice, not calculation, just an assumption so old and so complete that it had stopped needing to be examined. "We didn't think you'd mind. Because you never say anything. Because you've always handled it. Because you are the daughter who manages things and Caleb is the son who receives the credit, and we have never questioned whether that arrangement required your consent." "I mind," I said. "I have always minded. I just stopped saying so." She looked at me for a long moment. "I don't know what you want me to do with that." "Nothing tonight," I said. "Tonight is Dad's party. I'm going to go back in there and make sure it finishes the way I planned it." I paused. "But I want you to know that what happened in there tonight is the last time." I went back into the ballroom. I sat at table 7. Daniel took my hand under the table and held it for the rest of the evening. The party finished perfectly. It always does when I build it. What came after was slower. Not a confrontation. A renegotiation, the kind that happens in pieces over months when people who have operated on assumptions are required, finally, to look at them. My father called me 2 days after the party. He had never called me like this. Not with this particular quality in his voice, the one I associated with his professional manner when he was acknowledging something that required precision. He said, "I've been thinking about what Daniel said." I waited. "I want to ask you directly. Have I done that? Given you credit that belonged to you, to someone else?" I said, "Yes." He said, "For how long?" I said, "Most of my adult life." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Nadia. I didn't see it." I said, "I know." He said, "That's not an excuse." I said, "No, but it's where we start. My father is not a man who apologizes easily. He is a man who respects precision and accuracy. When he says I didn't see it and acknowledges it as a failure, that is, in the Ashworth family language, a genuine reckoning. I accepted it as one. My mother took longer. She is not a bad person. She is a person who built a life around a certain story and has discovered, at 64, that the story had a chapter she hadn't read. She called me in December, 2 months after the party, and said, "I've been thinking about something you said, that you've always minded." I said, "Yes." She said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Because every time I got close to telling you, there was a reason it wasn't the right time. Dad's schedule, Caleb's thing, some event that needed to go smoothly. There was always something that mattered more than me saying, 'This isn't working.'" She was quiet. "That's also on me," she said finally. "Not just on you." I said, "I know." She said, "Can I tell you something?" I said, "Yes." She said, "That party was the most beautiful event this family has ever had. I knew it while it was happening. I don't know why I couldn't say your name." I said, "I think you do know why." She didn't answer for a long time. Then she said, "Yes, I think I do." She has been figuring out what to do with that. So have I. Caleb called 3 weeks after the party. He was the one I least expected to call. He said, "I want to say something, and I want to say it without making excuses." I said, "Okay." He said, "I knew you were doing the work. Not all of it. I didn't know the 7 a.m. thing. I didn't know the bathroom thing. But I knew you were doing more than I was getting credit for. And I let it happen because it was easier." He paused. "I've been the guy who gets handed things his whole life. I didn't build that. I just occupied it." Another pause. "I'm sorry, Nadia." I said, "Thank you for calling." He said, "I mean it." I said, "I know." He said, "Can we have dinner sometime? Just us?" I said, "Yes." We had dinner in January. It was not seamless, but it was real. And Caleb picked up the check without making it a thing, which is more than he used to do. Daniel and I had our own conversation later that night at the party when we were in the car driving home. I said, "How long had you been planning to say that?" He said, "About 3 years." I laughed. He said, "I mean it. I've been watching it for 3 years and waiting for the right moment." I said, "Was the right moment your father-in-law's retirement party in front of 200 people?" He said, "You told me not to stop." I said, "I know." He said, "Was I wrong?" I looked at him across the front seat of our car. This man who had, at table 7, stood up without a microphone and made 200 people understand who I was. I said, "No, you weren't wrong." He said, "Good." He reached over and took my hand, because I've been holding that speech for a long time, and it needed to go somewhere. Let me tell you where everyone is now. I still do events. I always will. It is the thing I am most completely myself doing, and I refuse to let a family pattern taint the work I love. My firm promoted me to senior director 8 months ago. I am currently planning a fundraising gala for a children's hospital that will have 400 guests, a live auction, and a performance I cannot yet announce, but that has required 3 months of coordination. My name will be in the program. It always is in professional work. I insist on it. My parents are working on a new version of the family story. It is slow work. My mother sent me flowers on my birthday this year. Not a standard arrangement. Specific flowers she had looked up and found out were my favorites, white ranunculus, which I had used in the centerpieces at the retirement party. She included a note. "I have been paying more attention." I put the flowers in a vase on my desk at work and looked at them all week. My father asks me about my events now. Real questions, the way he used to ask Caleb about his deals. Specifics, numbers, outcomes. He called after the last hospital gala and said, "How did it go?" I told him, $1.4 million raised, largest single fundraiser in the hospital's history. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's remarkable, Nadia." Just that. But from Robert Ashworth, "That's remarkable" is a standing ovation. Caleb and I have dinner every 2 months. He is figuring out the difference between occupying a room and earning it. It is not a fast process, but he is actually doing it, which I did not expect, and which I am choosing to value. Daniel is still Daniel. He does not stand up at restaurants and announce things about me to the other diners. He saves it for when it matters. That is the most romantic thing about him, and also the most terrifying. Here is what I want to say before I go. There is work in this world that is invisible by design, not because it is small, but because it is done so well that the seams don't show. Event planning is one version of this. So is caregiving. So is the emotional labor of families. So is the work of being the person in the room who handles things so that everyone else can simply arrive and be present. This work is real. It is skilled. It is exhausting. And it is done well, a form of art. The people who benefit from invisible work have a responsibility that most of them are not meeting, not because they are cruel, because invisible work is, by definition, easy to forget. It does not announce itself. It does not leave a business card. It does not say, "This dinner happened because I made 30 phone calls." It just happens. And the person who made it happen smiles when someone else gets the toast. I am done smiling at that particular moment. If you are the person in your family who handles things, who plans, coordinates, manages, makes things work so that everyone else can simply show up, I want you to hear this clearly. That work is not the price you pay for belonging. It is not the contribution you owe in exchange for a seat at the table. It is skilled labor performed by a skilled person, and it deserves to be named, credited, and seen. Put your name on your work. Say what you did when someone else forgets to. And if the people at the table won't say it, find yourself a Daniel. The best ones stand up without a microphone when it counts. My name is Nadia Ashworth. I'm 36 years old. I have planned 400 events. I built a retirement party for 200 people that my family attributed to someone else, and my husband stood up at table 7 and told the truth in front of all of them. I was not mentioned in the toast, but I was seen. For the first time. Finally. Completely. That turned out to be better. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. If you are the person in your family who builds things while someone else takes the bow, drop a comment below. Tell me what you built. I read every single one. Share this with the person in your life who does the invisible work and never gets the credit. They need to know someone sees it. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.